What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Vinyl Tap. This is the sort of follow-up episode that I hinted at in the one I did these a couple of weeks ago, where I said I had some slightly different stuff in store compared to just a big old pile of vinyl. I cleared my kind of backlog of what I had up to that point in that previous episode. Hope you enjoyed watching that one. So today, we haven't got any vinyl. It's a vinyl-less vinyl tap. But I suppose it can be the beginnings of showing, utilising this series to show, some other bits and pieces. And today's episode is primarily going to be about, and not just Celtic Frost for those of you who are not dyed-in-the-wool fans of that band like I am, but it's sort of, I don't know, it shoots off in a couple of different directions based around that. And the main couple of items I got before diverting into some, I've got some books picked out and stuff like that, is where this came from, which is I picked up not too long ago, a few months ago, a couple of very large box sets based around certain bands and stuff like that come from Darkness Shall Rise Productions. These are the boxes in question that I currently have. We've got Hellhammer's Demon Entrails box and Celtic Frost's The Sign of the Usurper box. If you don't know Darkness Shall Rise Productions, if you follow certain extreme metal bands, you will probably have seen them appear. They're doing a massive Emperor one at the moment, so if you are at all Emperor inclined on your social media, you will likely have seen the enormous, incredibly expensive Emperor tape box set that they are putting out of everything that band ever did. They're incredibly comprehensive, these things. So when I say everything that band ever did, obviously Emperor have like 4 albums, but there's EPs and demos and live recordings and fucking, they all have, the one that always makes me go like slightly slack-jawed is they did a dissection one where that band have 3 albums. There was about 22 tapes in this fucking dissection set of rehearsals and all this kind of stuff. But I have picked up obviously the 2 related that they've done to my favourite band. Darkness Shall Rise Productions, as I say, they are kind of sort of they've popped up in the last few years and made a name for themselves as being a sort of boutique cassette tape label, I guess, for extreme metal, and they do put out some cool individual extreme metal licensed records and stuff like that. But the thing they have really made their bread and butter on are these enormous specialist sets for bands. There was a Catatonia one of like their early years stuff when they were like a death doom band that I really, really wanted, and I had to hold back on pulling that trigger so hard because I had to buy these ones and I had to buy them second hand on Discogs and stuff like that. I missed them when they went out at the time, and they're not the cheapest to try and find online, so I did splurge on these, but there's all sorts in them. So if you are a tape collector, I'm not like an extensive tape collector. I mean, most of the extent of them are on the fucking shelf behind me, and I've got a few at my mum's as well, but obviously, I was going to splash on something like this. It's kind of the main thing I will go for, rather than buying everything on tape. But if you are, interested in tapes, but also just the general stuff that they might have in something like this, let's peruse these box sets as we open it up. I mean, for a start, Demon Entrails is the art and everything. It's the name is the same as. It's basically a compilation that they put out years ago of the Hellhammer demos and stuff like that. You can buy it on vinyl. I think I have a shirt with this kind of design on it. But it's the standard kind of issue there. It looks cool. But inside we've got, first off, probably have to put this down to actually show this effectively, but we got just like all the various adverts and stuff. They did a warning one when they put out the Monotheist record on tape, which I do have individually elsewhere as well. Big Mayhem one, all this kind of stuff. But I think the first thing that's related really to this specific box is we've got a patch of the little Demon Entrails artwork, very cool. They do like to do these specialist kind of postcard things for them. So we've got the Celtic Frost and the Hellhammer dudes in this particular set. Hellhammer, I mean, some of the other stuff I have picked out as well will really express this. There is so many insane photo shoots of Hellhammer back in the day. Some of these bands, like when we were doing the Death Special, it was very hard for me to find a lot of photos of them, circa Scream Bloody Gore or Leprosy or whatever. No such issues with Hellhammer. They've done an amazing job of and Celtic Frost of documenting them. But they are, official postcards. Imagine getting that fucking sent to you from your mum on holiday. But there and there, we've got the proof of certificate thing signed by Tom G. Warrior. There, this is 434 of 1,000 that they put together. Just got the list of the kind of the things that the set includes in there. We've got some big posters of these. So we've got the Triumph of Death, the Death Fiend. Even these are the same artwork, but the Death Fiend cassette. I love this photo. This is one of my favourite photos of Martin Eric Kane. Tribute poster on the back there. I think the same here of Triumph of Death, which, as I said, has basically the same artwork. It's them. Logic would then suggest that we have Satanic Rites up next, which is the final Hellhammer demo. And then we actually really get into the good stuff. We've got a book here, which will have lots of, again, images and stuff like that of what the original... They tried... So Hellhammer, again, if you're not really familiar, Hellhammer never put out an album. Hellhammer is the band that kind of bled into Celtic Frost, where it was what they formed as. They put out a series of very, very influential and important demos, but dissolved before they could actually do a proper studio recording and became Celtic Frost. But these Hellhammer demos are like absolutely essential pieces of extreme music history. So, and when they were putting them out on tape, they tried to basically adhere as much as possible to the original sort of look of them and stuff like that. So you can see these very, old school hand printed style thanks lists and layouts and stuff like that. But you've got, some history stuff of Hellhammer, some, thoughts and retrospectives, and then also all the lyrics for those tracks as well. So very nice little document to have in there. And then the real meat of this particular set is, as we see here, try to do this without them falling out and smashing, but the Hellhammer collections here. We've got the 3 core demos and some other stuff in here. This isn't the complete Hellhammer catalogue, I guess, and that they did put out the Apocalyptic Raids EP, which is the final thing that they did before breaking up after doing these demos. Darkness Shall Rise did put out Apocalyptic Raids separately, which I do have. It's over on the shelf behind me, but this tape set is essentially for the demo trilogy. So we've got Death Fiend, which a bit of a weird history with it. It was the first one they sort of put together, but they didn't officially actually release it. And then they did the Triumph of Death demo, and they reused the same artwork because they hadn't really released Death Fiend. There's a few of the same tracks on it, but then a whole bunch more. But these are, extremely raw little demos, but very cool to have them on this kind of format. Obviously, if we look at something like Death Fiend, we open it up. As I said, it's got the very traditional kind of layout of what like an old 1980s extreme metal hand printed demo would kind of look like in terms of quality of printing and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very cool. Then we have, as I said, the Satanic Rites demo, which I do have on vinyl as well. I need to pick up the other two on some kind of, whether it is the Demon Entrails collection or whatever. But Satanic Rites is a fucking amazing demo. Like, this is, if you want to listen to Hellhammer, I reckon that the Satanic Rites demo is about as good as really you can get it, considering demo quality and all these kind of things. But this is a fucking legendary piece of work. And then the last little thing in there was a lovely little inner cassette box as is, but it's a Hellhammer enamel metal logo pin. That's the word I'm looking for. Very awesome little thing there. So that is the Hellhammer Demon Entrails box, and then similar treatment, but actually, as you can see by the widths of them, larger and chunkier. They did give to Celtic Frost. Now this is Sign of the Usurper. It has, the cover art here is very interesting. It's the kind of the Celtic Frost heptagram that they have on most things, but it's a slightly different variant of it, where in the middle it's got this kind of skull heart thing, I guess is what that is. I've never seen this before on any other thing. It must have been, for this release, but Sign the Usurper. This is, if the Demon Entrails box set is for the, specifically the Hellhammer demo trilogy they did, this is basically based around the first 3 classic Celtic Frost albums. If you know the Celtic Frost discography, there's the first 3 records. Then things go dramatically downhill, as I showed off in the last one of these videos when I picked up Cold Lake on vinyl. Then they broke up for ages, and then they came back with Monotheist. As I mentioned in the previous video, Cold Lake, you are not seeing that fucking reprinted, repressed, put out in any format, anywhere. So it's no surprise that we don't have a complete discography box set for Celtic Frost like we did get with Emperor and these other bands that Darkness Shall Rise have done this treatment for. So this is basically, sort of 1984 to 1987 Celtic Frost. But even so, that provides a wealth of stuff to get in there. Darkness Shall Rise have put out, like I said, with the little flyer, Monotheist individually on cassette, so which I do also have as well. So 4 of the 6 Celtic Frost albums are kind of readily available through this label on tape. And then let's have a look inside this Celtic Frost box as we did with the Hellhammer one. As I said, it is chunkier, so there's even more stuff here. We have, there was that large logo flag that I showed off earlier. That was in a little plastic bag, not even fitting in the box itself. Very first thing we have here at the back is this kind of, it's hard to actually fold it out, logo back patch, I guess, a little small top one. The bat wings version of the Celtic Frost logo is such a cool thing. You don't see it kind of printed on things so often, but like, because it's a weird shape to have to put on things, but like, it is fucking awesome. Look at the gnarled hands at the bottom. Also, I don't have any plans to put these patches on any jackets or anything in the meantime, but awesome little things. Similarly to the other one, we have the little proof of certificate thing. Doesn't look like this one's signed like the Hellhammer one was, but this is 766 of 1,000. Got all the stuff in there. A book, again, a slightly chunkier book, probably a few more years of stuff to go on. This is all if you have like the vinyl reissues they did for the Celtic Frost records a few years ago. The lyrics and the kind of notes and everything in this are essentially the exact same as in the kind of booklets and stuff from there. So I've got these exact texts I have printed on like a number of different releases, but good little Celtic Frost story documenting in there. Similarly to the Demon Entrails one, we have the sign of the Usurper little designed patch. So this one probably is quite exclusive if the the heptagram itself is a little bit unusual, but again, just got some here's the Apocalyptic Raids thing they did, as well as the Sign of the Usurper stuff. More postcards of, Giga and stuff like that. Great, send those to your friends and family. More posters we have here. This looks like a gig flyer of some kind. Yeah, Celtic Frost, live from Switzerland with Astaroth support act from Italy. I'm not really familiar with that band. I'm not sure where this looks like. It's in Germany somewhere, and then I think this is some kind of flyer thing for around the time of the Morbid Tales record. We've got, it's hard to actually get this shit out of the box sometimes. We have another poster of just fucking old school corpse painter set, you know what I mean, and that's them bleeding through from the other side as well. Looks like Martin Ain, another one of those kind of tribute posters, because he had died a few years by the time that these records were put out, but nice to have one of those in here, different kind of logo there. And then I think finally, as we actually begin to get down to the tapes here, we've got the Sign of the Usurper style poster, and then the other designs. This one has so many tapes in it, it's actually double layered. So here we have, I have to work my way through to the bottom. We've got the Morbid Tales album. I won't talk through all of these, super intimately music-wise, because, I mean, let's face it, that's going to come up another time somewhere. But we've got Morbid Tales. We have Morbid Tales rehearsal session. Those are some of the things that were kind of exclusive to collections like this. It's not just the albums, but some kind of, bunker sessions and stuff like that, like a cool red tape and stuff like that. We've got the Emperor's Return EP, where it's absolutely mental old, fantasy novel style artworks with where it's just tits and demons everywhere. This is the EP they put out between albums, which has like the original version of Circle of the Tyrants and stuff. That's on a green cassette. And 2 Megatherion, fucking incredible essential album, awesome HR Giga artwork there. That's on a silver tape, and then that's cleared us down to the next layer where we have the Into the Pandemonium album, which we did that crazy album club on not long ago on a gold, just fucking wild record. And then also some Enter the Pandemonium extra stuff. These are like bonus songs and stuff like that, because there is a fair bit from that record that was sort of, I think we said on the album club about the bizarre kind of track list variations that you can get of different versions of that record. This is sort of a lot of the extra stuff that's on there, so that's cool. And then we do have, as we had in the Hellhammer box, a pin, which here is like a classic Celtic Frost style heptagram, again slightly different to the ones on the front. This is more of the Morbid Tales kind. I have to decide which one of these pins I'm going to put on this here jacket. I have a space. I suppose I'll go through it in case you're interested. Got a Rotten Christ pin here, the Devil's Blood. On this side we've got Dark Throne, Paradise Lost, the old school Death Doom logo, and then this is I think her name's Cheryl from, Linda from The Evil Dead is what that is. But over here, we've got a space. I used to have a Integrity pin there, the little skull logo they had, but the securing on the back of that one was a bit weak. And at Damnation Festival last year, it was lost to this world. I've got a little space for one, and I've got to decide whether this Celtic Frost one or the Hellhammer one from the other set is going to go on there, but I will figure that out in time. But those are the two large Darkness Shall Rise tape box sets I got for Hellhammer and Celtic Frost. Very much recommend you if you are interested in extreme metal cassettes, I guess. I know that the portion of you who listen to us who that applies to will have gone tenfold through saying that, but like check out Darkness Shall Rise. They put out some really awesome deluxe style bits and bobs like that. As I said, I did have to shell out a fair amount to get those ordered to me from people in Europe online and stuff like that, but very lovely little things to have on the shelf and root through and stuff like that. And on that kind of link into this other stuff, I've got basically a pile of books here to go through. I know that some people have asked over the years about heavy metal or rock music kind of book recommendations and stuff like that. This is not everything. I have a lot of stuff I've got back at my mum's or whatever, but some things that are sort of relevant to what we've been talking about that to kind of feed in here. I thought we can start doing bits like that in these kind of videos. And obviously, with the time period of what I've just showed off, this next one is the natural thing to lead into. This is Only Death is Real, an illustrated history of Hellhammer and early Celtic Frost, 1981 to 1985, written by Tom G. Warrior, with help from Martin Eric, and I believe that he was still alive at the time that this was put out. As you can see, this is a hefty book. If you see it online now in shops, it can be, it's like one of those kind of like 30 quid type big drops, but that just goes to show, I guess, it's a hefty fucking hardback with a lot of information in here, where this is, as I said, it's basically Tom G. Warrior fully, laying out the lay of the land and the kind of the story of how Hellhammer and early Celtic Frost kind of came to be. Which is, obviously for me, it's very interesting, but also in general, obviously that doesn't cover up to, I think it basically stops around the time of 2 Megatherion. It doesn't go into all the mental shit we were talking about with the Pandemonium on the album club, forward into Cold Lake and so on. I believe he did write another book, Tom, in 2003, that I think was called Are You Morbid? And that was like a more complete kind of biography of Celtic Frost up to that point. But it's been out of print for ages, and it's really fucking expensive to try and find it online, so I've never managed to get my hands on that one. But for the early years, this book is absolutely excellent. It's got an introduction by Nocturno Culto, and then obviously a kind of a forward by Joel McIver, who did all those big Metallica books, I believe I'm right in saying. Did make me think, looking at that and going, man, I fucking wish Metallica had done Celtic Frost on Garage Inc. the way they did Merciful Fate. And I know that the slightly improvised jam that Kirk and Rob did of the Usurper years ago, when they were doing really fucking sloppy shit at their shows, not the best example of what they could do with that, and Tom hilariously kind of called them out for it. But like, can you imagine like 1998 Metallica when they did all that shit, going into, you know, the Usurper or something from Morbid Tales or something? And I just feel like the way that legitimized Merciful Fate for people who don't really know a lot about extreme metal, like, I feel like my job of actually talking to people about Celtic Frost will be made a lot easier, and I'd be coming up against less walls if Metallica had recording a fucking cover. We know we were aware of them because of what they did. But yeah, that just would have been cool. But this book, I haven't read it in a number of years. When we eventually get round to doing Celtic Frost and Hellhammer specials and stuff like that, this will become a extremely valuable text. But it's interesting, basically, because of this sort of document of weird isolation, you know, like how a band doing this really unconventional, at the time not at all accepted for its extremity thing in, you know, a kind of isolated place like Switzerland, when you think of, you know, metal scenes in the 1980s and stuff like that. You know, being in this environment of ridicule, but powering through it and finding your own kind of you know, creative thing that you're going to do. This is a really, you know, interesting sort of look at how that can kind of be. And it has, you know, in general, it's like stuff around like Tom's early life, like some fucking crazy stuff that he kind of like, you know, went through, was around in his kind of childhood years and stuff like that, that led into you know, his focus on dark, heavy music. But in general, the you know, the birth of a band like Hellhammer, who had never, you know, existed before, really. What went into that, you know, the influence of Venom, of new wave of British heavy metal. They talk about taking trips to London to buy, you know, 7 inches and stuff like that. And in general, kind of around, you know, a 1980s dark metal scene, some of the weird people that they just bump into, like, you know, stories of them in the kind of like Nazi occultists that they kind of, you know, were around at points, and how they tried to navigate, you know, passing those kind of people and, you know, not getting involved with them. Just like the freaky people who pop up around, you know, weird things. And like I was saying with the tapes, there are so many photos of, you know, Celtic Frost and Hellhammer in these years that are just wonders to behold. There were so many. There are some of, you know, fucking holding weaponry and stuff like that. There's actually the back here, there's a great like sort of evolution of all the different like logos and stuff like that, which as a nerd is like, you know, their own fucking typography font. Can't really see it there, but, you know, stuff like that went into creating this stuff. Like, it is fascinating to kind of go through like all the old art and stuff like that. Yeah, it, like, just as a kind of picture library, as a picture library alone, this book is wonderful. But like, I'm even struggling to hold it up to show you because it's so fucking heavy. Like, it's a really, really big, formidable tome about quite a small period in a band's existence. You know, it only covers 4 years of time, really. But you know, it's obviously, if you're a Celtic Frost fan, it's an essential. Basically, it's, you know, the guy setting the record straight and laying it all out, what really happened. But also, it's just as a concept, I guess, how an extreme band that can change the world forever in terms of musical influence and kind of the bands that they inspire can arise from kind of, you know, backwoods Switzerland and places like that don't really have the kind of infrastructure or the understanding or, you know, the interest, just kind of battling through that. And in that, it's a very, you know, very, very worthy read in that sense. Next up is this, which is Morbid Tales, a tribute to Celtic Frost. This is edited by Mark Rudolph, has contributions from all sorts of people. This is a sort of, you know, almost a companion piece of that book. I think I got them around the same time, but it's a rather fun, you know, more light-hearted little mix in that is, you know, a huge fucking again, you know, tome documenting a whole period of time. This is a tribute to, you know. Mark Rudolph, you may know if you are a reader of Decibel magazine or you follow him on Instagram or whatever. He's the guy who does the lead review in Decibel every month in their magazine. Gets a cool little illustration of, I think, you know, Venom Prison had one recently done of them for when Erebos came out. And he's a wonderful, like, little, you know, metal artist who does, you know, those cool drawings and stuff like that. And this is a whole book worth of stuff like that, based around people basically sharing their Celtic Frost stories. Like this, in comparison to the other one, I don't think there's anything from Tom or the actual members of Celtic Frost involved with this. It's more, you know, people in other bands in the industry kind of sharing the, you know, the importance of Celtic Frost and Tom's work to them. It's also, you know, in memory of H.R. Giger. He'd died, I think, maybe a year or two prior to this coming out, and obviously very heavily involved there as well. So, like, this is just a you know, very cute little book of a mixture of stories and comics and stuff like that. I want to say about, you know, here's Thomas Lindbergh from At the Gates, sharing his little, you know, texts and stuff like that. I believe we have his Fenris looking incredible. We've got, I think, Chris Reifert from Autopsy is in here somewhere looking fucking nasty. He's like holding some guts or something. There he is. Tilla Chihar from Mayhem has got a very cool little illustration of him, which he does basically look like exactly like he is on stage. But we've got fucking Shane Embury at the back. Scott Kelly's in here somewhere looking a lot more grim. And yeah, it's just lots of people like that, and obviously, you know, huge names in the kind of underground metal community, all just talking about, you know, I learned such and such from Celtic Frost. But we've also got kind of like almost like cute little comic mythologizing of, like, you know, here's the way of the warrior with, you know, Tom G. Warrior transitioning from, you know, this kind of little kid in the Swiss Alps to, you know, metal legend with fucking this Kronos, like H.R. Giger's in here again. It's just like, you know, again, fictionalized, mythologized. Even some of the stuff about the fucking cat piss from the other book is involved in this. But you know, again, like little mythologized origin stories for, you know, Hellhammer and Celtic Frost and stuff like that, with this awesome artwork with lots and lots of metal legends chipping in along the way to kind of share what Celtic Frost meant to them. So it's a very, like, you know, fun little book. Doesn't take very long to read. This was put out kind of in tandem with a tribute record that I believe went by the same name. It wasn't sold with it, so I do not have that, unfortunately. It's probably quite expensive if you were to try and find it right now. But it was, you know, a vinyl printed tribute record of lots of people, again, covering Celtic Frost. I believe that there was, I think Phil Anselmo was on there, like Municipal Waste are on there, Evoken. The one that always sticks out in my mind from that record is Acid Witch, who are the crazy Halloween Death Doom band that I brought on for a Halloween album roulette last year, covering cherry orchards from Cold Lake. So, and it fucking rules. Like, that song is big anyway, but, you know, getting Acid Witch is like, you know, Hubble Bubble fucking, you know, Cauldron mix on a glam metal Celtic Frost tune like that. It's awesome. But this is, again, if you are just a fan, it's a very fun little book. And I suppose the segue here is we are going to, you know, non-explicitly fucking Tom G. Warrior related stuff. He does do the foreword for this. This is a book that I have just read, like, in the last week or so. It's very fresh in my mind, this one. USBM, A Revolution of Identity in American Black Metal. This is written by Daniel Lake, who I believe is a Decibel writer. It's come out under Decibel Books. But as I said, there is a foreword by Tom G. Warrior here, which is interesting because obviously he is not an American black metal artist, but he is, you know, someone of the kind of original, you know, wave of European bands who, you know, formed what black metal was going to be, but looking out over what, you know, people in a different place at a different time kind of made of that. And that's particularly interesting in regards to USBM because American black metal has historically, it's kind of been a long dead idea by, you know, 2022. I suppose it was sort of on its arse end around the time that I started getting into black metal. But American black metal historically was sort of looked down upon and viewed as, not the real thing. The real thing was what was coming out of Europe. Obviously, you had Bathory and Celtic Frost and stuff, and then going into the second wave of the Norwegian bands. And American black metal was almost like, what could they possibly do with it? They're not from the cold north or whatever. And so you have people making black metal who, the black metal centre, I guess, over in Europe, wants nothing to do with them. And why I think, Tom G. Warrior doing a forward for that is interesting, because he is someone who, like I was saying, with the Hellhammer books and stuff like that, started out making music in direct opposition to what anyone wanted to listen to. And, had to battle through a lot of that kind of judgment and sneering and stuff of what he was making wasn't real music, basically. And so, there is a real kinship. And that story, I guess, through this book of American black metal, the bands that pioneered it, the bands that went up against that kind of wall of disinterest, and then going through to the modern day. This is a really, really cool and fascinating book if you are a black metal fan. Obviously, it kind of goes chronologically and then by sort of region. So it starts off with the 90s kind of pioneers of Vaughn and Profanatica and those kind of bands in the American black metal sphere, who at that time were, again, totally out on a limb. Wasn't any scene infrastructure to support them. People didn't really give a shit most of the time. And then that goes through to Death Heaven and Liturgy and stuff like that in the modern day, and how that changing, musically and critically, and kind of, how that culture is sort of viewed, the shift across that time. And it's a really fascinating book in terms of both, probably there'll be shitloads of bands in there that you won't really be aware of, that you might, discover something with. I was, listening to a lot of cool stuff while going through reading these chapters, but also a portrait of a scene, and I guess really builds up in that you have, people in different areas, someone in Chicago, someone in California, someone in, the Appalachia region or whatever, but the timeline kind of intersects, so you get this kind of picture built up as you go through the chapters of, lots of people doing things at the same time in kind of different areas, and then when it really dials into like a hub scene, you get the sense of I don't want to say community for black metal, because a lot of it is almost like one-man projects and stuff like that, but kind of existing around. So you get like the San Francisco scene of the early noughties, which starts with something like Weakling, and then you get Leviathan and Zasfer and all those kind of projects. Very fascinating to kind of, I guess, drill into exactly what all these people were doing around those times and what they were kind of inspired by. The different impulses that bring people like, Panopticon and Wolves in the Throne Room through to, again, Zasfer and stuff like that, kind of what brings them to their music. There are some fucking characters in this book, like Paul Ledney from Profanatica is fucking hilarious, and he's so he has such an idea of he likes his black metal to be kind of bestial and heavy and dirty, and he's very against flowery European keyboard stuff. And there's a quote where he talks about his wife is always like, just let them, no one wants you to fix it, just let them listen to their shitty stuff and sing about the moon, they don't care what you think. He's like, I can't keep it inside myself. Singing about the moon and holding a torch in the woods is not cool. But he's really funny, and it almost becomes used as a scale, pops up throughout the book of like, Paul Ledney from Profanatica would perhaps appreciate this album more than this one, to kind of illustrate what certain bands sound like or whatever. It's very funny and well written. Some bizarre characters like the Black Funeral guy plugging away the idiot from Absu, like all these kind of people. On that, it opens even with a chapter before even going into the bands, just addressing bad shit in black metal, where it acknowledges some of the people in this book are not very cool and have said and done a lot of bad shit over the years. They might hold some racist viewpoints, some homophobic viewpoints, anything like that. We're going to address this, and we'll kind of explore how to navigate these kind of situations or whatever. The fact that obviously you have to talk about Inquisition, for example, in a book like this, and in the, again, 90s pioneers, I think it's like the third chapter in there is all about fucking Grand Belial's Key, which, if you know anything about racists in black metal, they are pretty much like one of the first names that you will come to. But it does a good job, this book, of kind of, acknowledging the importance that these people had in their kind of scene, the influence that the music may have had on people, but while, again, recognizing and pointing out, like, these guys are fucking chuds, like, and it doesn't shy away from that in the kind of the larger sense that some of the more, apolitical books or whatever might kind of do. So it's a very, very well written book that if you are interested in something like American black metal and how that kind of came to be in contrast to, the European home of it or whatever, like, and just how important some of these bands, tiny bands, are to people in showing them what they could do in their areas and stuff like that. When you read the Weakling chapter, and like, obviously if you know anything about kind of the trajectory of American black metal, the kind of their one record, and it's like everyone who fucking heard that like formed a band and pioneered something of themselves, or people like Judas Iscariot and stuff like that dude, and kind of what he the influence that he had on people. Like, yeah, very fascinating little book. It's made me want to pick up a lot more of, there's a book on Finnish black metal and all these kind of, variants and stuff like that, just to kind of the fascinating little stories that you get. And from there, got something a little bit similar, but a lot more kind of classic, I guess. This is Choosing Death, the Improbable History of Death Metal and Grindcore. This was bought for me a number of years ago. I believe that since then, they have put out there was like a reissued, variant of it, I guess, whatever, republished, that had an awesome Dan Seagrave painted cover art to obviously look the part. This has just got, some dudes. There's Jeff Walker from Carcass, people like that. But this book came out in 2004. So this is now 18 years old, this book originally. And this is a book that people talk about as being quite seminal of, pre, social media and stuff like that. This text was a real point of discovery for people. And it's interesting now that obviously 18 years ago, what has happened since in regards to the evolutions of death metal and grindcore and their influence and stuff like that. This book is fucking old, like a year older than Ascendancy by Trivium. And, when you think of Gothenburg death metal and how huge that kind of became and things like that. But this is, again, history of death metal and grindcore from the kind of, mid-80s up to 2004, which is, sort of the beginnings of a sort of, or a few years into a kind of resurgence at that time. It's got an intro by John Peel, which is obviously, he's very involved with stuff like the 80s grindcore scene and stuff like that. But this is a very, it's one of those books that if you are interested in a sort of, historical level on things like death metal, you will always come across this book being recommended to you and stuff like that. It's just a very big, important text. Similarly to the USBM thing, it kind of jumps across chapters to kind of build a sort of scene timeline where you've got, Florida death metal going on. You jump across the ocean to Swedish, like Stockholm death metal and stuff like that. You've got the grindcore boom going on in the UK. And it kind of moves along chronologically between those things. I haven't read this one in a long time either. I did recently reread the chapter that is to do with the formation of Mantas and Early Death when we were doing that special, like some of the information about, how the Massacre guys met Chuck Schuldiner and stuff like that. I picked that out of this book. Particularly of interest to me is the sections kind of entering the mid-90s into the late 90s, when you have the kind of major label boom of, fucking death metal getting super, super commercial and, the business wanting to snap up all of these bands and stuff like that. And then it kind of busts and the style kind of falls out of fashion. That's a very interesting period to be covered in this book. And like I said, when this book comes out in 2004, we've kind of had a few years of resurgence with, bands like Nile and stuff like that coming out and making death metal cool again. And you also have, as an upcoming band, the recognition of Slipknot and stuff like that of, huge fucking bands. But I think it's cool how, again, this book, it doesn't sneer at Slipknot. It goes like, this fucking band are massive and they are taking legitimate death metal influence and ideals and translating that to loads and loads of kids who are then going to go and discover Immolation and stuff like that. So, yeah, obviously it's 20 years behind, what is contemporary now, but certainly like the growth of these kind of genres between, when it was published and when they first started kicking about. This is an absolutely essential book that should be on, by now probably is already on most people's bookshelves. And the final thing I've got for this video is a bit of a weird release. This is Autopsy and After the Cutting. Topical in it. They've been in the news lately. Not any Pit Cunnilingus is documented in this to my memory. This came out in kind of the mid-2010s, 2015 or something, maybe. This is, I would say it's a weird release. It's a kind of biography best-of combination, in that if I open here, you see we have 4 CDs. And this was, as I say, it's a book telling the story of Autopsy, like very in-depth about, that band. But it was kind of packaged with a best-of compilation with all. It's kind of cool seeing the different logos that they've had over the years on those CDs. But obviously, Autopsy, I think if you were interested in, the Death Special that we just did, this spins off from that, because obviously Chris Reifert was in the band Death on Scream Bloody Gore, and then left and formed the legendary death metal band Autopsy. So we almost start at that point of, obviously him getting to death metal, but then also that, and then spins off into Autopsy and all the things they did. Super influential band. We've never really done anything about Autopsy on the show. I mean, I would certainly like to. I'm sure that, Severed Survival or Mental Funeral or something will be an album club at some point. But incredibly important death metal band for the grottier and, dirgier, nasty. I mean, look at this cover art. Like, this is, you can imagine, they are absolute gore, filth legends. But, you have in this book things like, the Dark Throne guys discovering Autopsy and all that kind of stuff. But so if you are, it's for fans only really, but if you are an Autopsy fan, it's a wonderful little, document of all the stuff. And again, just they're similar to the Celtic Frost one. Their like art style and stuff like that is so distinctive. Here we have the original Act of the Unspeakable cover, which got banned or like censored or whatever, because it's the full thing was just fucking like ridiculous. Like, this Hieronymus Bosch debauchery. Trying to find some more artwork. There we go. There's something nasty and cool, like just very filthy, nasty gore. The original Severed Survival cover, always loved that stuff. So just cool images to flick through and see in here. But as I said, it was kind of packaged with being this, and I don't think you could buy these sort of individually. The best bit sort of angle of it is, a bit perfunctory, because I suppose we discussed this on the podcast. Like, surely anyone who's going to be buying and reading this book already owns Severed Survival and Mental Funeral. But what is cool about these is you actually have loads of rarities as well, like 4 CDs worth. There's loads of early demos, so you can get a sense of kind of what they were trading around the underground, stuff like that. There's EPs, like splits. There's kind of there was their first song when they reunited. It wasn't on an album; it was just like a comeback single. All those kind of bits. And there was also, I believe, in 2015 when this came out, they put out a sort of mini album called Skull Grinder. And I think I'm right in saying that was exclusively released as part of this. Like, the first bunch of tracks on this, like 7 or so, is the Skull Grinder mini album that was only on this. But it's certainly like, I mean, it's just it's massive. Like, it's so wide to have on my shelf, but like, it's cool to have sitting up there. Just one of the absolute, Autopsy to me are one of the definitive encapsulating of like the spirit of death metal kind of bands. And this, telling that story with a bunch of cool stuff along with it, is a rad thing to have up here. As I said, that is not everything I have in regards to heavy metal literature and things like that. Some things that are not heavy metal as well. Like, there's some books that I definitely want to buy for things that we've got coming up, bits like that I can kind of jot in where appropriate. But that's a nice little first go of some of the reading material that I like to have based around the music that I love, as well as those big fucking Celtic Frost tape box sets and stuff like that. So that is it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I might have been slightly more rambly than some of the other ones because I'm just discussing texts rather than records, but let me know if you kind of are interested in anything more of this vein. Probably someone else will do the next one of these. So thank you very much for watching. Cheerio.